Next hour for you. We've all noticed, have we, how Vladimir Putin likes to sit his guests a long way from him. If he's neurotic about catching COVID, what does that say about his ability to think about and manage risk? Has lockdown got to him? And what does that mean for us? Lawrence Fox will be my guest and yours. Also, who'd have thunk it? Germany looks set to turn back to nuclear power before Putin turns off the gas. Why was Germany's decision to scrap nuclear after a tsunami in Japan one of the most boneheaded in recent European history? And a doctor will explain why a sudden craving for crisps or chocolates may mean your body has something important to tell you. Alongside me throughout the next 2 hours, the commentator Cathy Gingell. But first, the headlines for you.
Good afternoon, it's 1 minute past 4. I'm Rhiannon Jones in the GB newsroom. The UK has stepped up sanctions against Russia, banning all ships with any connection to the country from entering British ports. The Prime Minister is now in Estonia, having met his counterpart in Poland this morning. He held a joint conference with Estonia's Prime Minister Kaja Kallas, who said Belarusian troops were also part of the invasion force in Ukraine. Speaking at the Tapa military base, Boris Johnson said the UK and its allies must isolate Vladimir Putin from the international community for his actions.
It's clearer, day by day, from the way the Ukrainians are responding, that President Putin has made a disastrous miscalculation. His troops have not been welcomed into Ukraine as he prophesied, and instead the Ukrainians have mounted an astonishing and tenacious resistance.
Earlier at a conference in Poland, a Ukrainian activist challenged Boris Johnson over introducing a no-fly zone and appealed for more help to protect Ukraine's citizens.
Britain guaranteed our security under Budapest Memorandum. So you're coming to Poland. You're not coming to Kiev, Prime Minister. You're not coming to Lviv because you're afraid. Because NATO is not willing to defend. Because NATO is afraid of World War III. But it is already started. Putin's children are in Netherlands, in Germany, in mansions. Where are all these mansions seized? I don't see that. I see that my family members, that my team members are saying that we are crying. We don't have where to run.
And clearly incredibly moved there. Ukraine has been facing another day of heavy bombardment. The Foreign Ministry has released video footage of a missile hitting a government building in Kharkiv this morning. The Interior Ministry says at least 10 people have been killed and 35 wounded in rocket strikes by Russian forces in the city today. The chief prosecutor of the International Criminal Court says he'll open an investigation into possible war crimes in Ukraine. Amnesty International says cluster bombs hit a nursery last week. Ukraine's ambassador to the US says Russia has used vacuum bombs. Both are banned under the Geneva Convention. In an address to the European Parliament, Ukraine's president accused Russia of targeting civilians.
Nobody's going to break us. We are strong. We are Ukrainians. We want our children to live. It seems to me that is fair. Yesterday, 16 children died, and again, President Putin will say that this is an operation and we are beating the military infrastructure. Where are our children? What military factories do they work at? On which rockets? Maybe they ride in tanks.
Volodymyr Zelensky speaking there. Now, there was a mass walkout from the UN Human Rights Council as the Russian foreign minister began speaking. Diplomats and ambassadors left the room as video message from Sergei Lavrov began to play at the conference on disarmament. Foreign Secretary Liz Truss says his statement was full of disinformation and didn't deserve their attention. Lavrov was unable to travel to Geneva because of the EU ban on Russian flights. He criticised European and UK sanctions against his country. The UN's refugee agency says 150,000 people have already crossed from Ukraine to neighbouring countries. So far, almost 680,000 people are believed to have fled the violence. Here, the Home Secretary Priti Patel announced that more Ukrainians will be eligible to seek refuge in the UK.
Firstly, we are establishing an expansive Ukrainian family scheme so that British nationals and people settled in the UK can bring a wider group of family members to the UK, extending eligibility to parents, grandparents, adult offspring, siblings, and their immediate family members. Again, the scheme will be free. Those joining family in the UK will be granted leave for an initial period of 12 months. They will be able to work and access public funds. Secondly, we will establish a humanitarian sponsorship pathway, which will open up a route to the UK for Ukrainians who may not have family ties with the UK.
In other news, a British fugitive who's been on the run for nearly a decade has been arrested in Spain. Sarah Panitsky is accused of laundering £1 billion as part of a mobile phone tax fraud. She was picked up while walking her dogs in the coastal city in Spain of Tarragona. And the UK government is being accused of adding to the cost of living crisis following the biggest rise in rail fares in 9 years. From today, ticket prices in England and Wales are 3.8% more expensive. The Campaign for Better Transport says the hike couldn't come at a worse time for commuters. This is GB News. We'll bring you more as it happens. Now, though, it's back to Brazier.
This afternoon, we start with the question: has lockdown affected the balance of Vladimir Putin's mind? It's some question, isn't it? The US presidential hopeful, Marco Rubio, is one of several leading international figures who are now openly speculating about the impact of COVID specifically on the Russian president's increasingly erratic behaviour. I wonder if you remember the picture. There were more than one. If you're listening on radio, you know the one we mean. It's Putin at the end of a long desk, a meeting with Emmanuel Macron. The French president was told he could sit closer to Putin, but only if he took a PCR test. Is Putin neurotic about catching long COVID? Perhaps he's paranoid about contracting the virus because, as some in Russia have speculated, he has a pre-existing condition. At the very least, lockdown has seen him cooped up, denied contact with the reality that exposure to a wide circle of people involves. So runs this argument. Joining me, the anti-lockdown campaigner, Lawrence Fox. Lawrence Fox, appreciate your time. Thanks very much indeed. There'll be people listening to my introduction there thinking, well, that's a silly question. How can we possibly know? To which I say, when that picture first emerged of Putin at the end of that long table, my initial reaction, as I think probably many people, was to think he's just trying to intimidate people. But then he did it again and again and again. It became apparent it was about his relationship and his ability to balance the risk posed by COVID.
Well, it's very difficult because, you're looking at social media today and people are going mad over everything. But the things that we do know about Vladimir Putin is that he has engaged in biological warfare in the United Kingdom. He sent 2 agents over with enough Novichok to kill 1,000 people in Salisbury. And he has launched a nuclear attack on an individual in the United Kingdom, in Alexander Litvinenko. So I can only operate on what I know about him. And I think what I know about him unsettles me deeply.
This is not an academic question. This is about as real as it gets. This is somebody who wields enormous power, who has access to the nuclear codes of the largest atomic arsenal in the world. He is right now calibrating a series of factors, risk and reward. We want to be persuaded that this is a rational actor. We get an insight perhaps into his mind if we look at how he balances the risks of COVID.
You don't know because he's not spoken about it. So you get an insight. I actually tend to agree with you that it's about intimidation. No one knows the ins and outs of. Apparently, you read across the Western media that he's been in isolation for a long period of time, that he's frightened of COVID, but we don't know. What we do know is what you've just said, which is that has his finger on the button of the most devastating nuclear arsenal on Earth, and these bellicose blue Twitter warriors should possibly go to the Ukrainian embassy in London and volunteer to go and fight for them. because it's appalling, the bellicosity of this. Hitler did not have nuclear weapons. We should not be winding up a very unstable, a man who does not obey international law, has contempt for it, as far as I can see from his actions. We should not be winding this man up. We should be hoping that he's made such a bad decision that he's taken down from within. But he's the greatest threat to modern civilization I can see, as far as I'm concerned.
If whatever your posture is, whether you're in an armchair and however bellicose you are about this, is not the appropriate response. If you are furious with what's happening, and if you are serious about offering a response to it, it's to go down to your local recruiting office for the British Army, the RAF or the Royal Navy and sign up potentially for years, because that's what we're looking at here, potentially. A resumption of the Cold War, a restoration of the Cold War 2.0, whatever it is. And we're going to see again, I think, large garrison towns, which we used to see in Germany, 50,000 strong at one stage, in countries like Estonia and Poland. If you're serious about hating Putin and everything he stands for, that is the rational response.
That would make sense, wouldn't it? It is the rational response. The most difficult thing about this is he's totally unpredictable. I mean, he's predictable in his unpredictability, but we also have to take responsibility as the West for our NATO expansionism. And Ukraine has been, as far back to decades ago, people have been saying that's a red line for Putin. So he's a despotic, evil, megalomaniacal psychopath, and he's in a situation where he cannot go backwards. There's no way out for him. Stalin died in power. Yeltsin managed to negotiate his way out of it. But he is in a position now where every option is open to him. So I think it's really important that we very much realise that there's a great deal more under threat than those calling for no-fly zones in the Ukraine airspace are. I mean, this is absolute insanity. This man is deeply unhinged, I would say.
Well, and that's why I know people feel it's a non sequitur, but I mean that's why I'm drawing attention to those pictures and the COVID question, and indeed potentially the balance of his mind. I'm struck, and I sense you are too, Lawrence Fox, by what I'm hearing, and it reminds me a little bit to some of the reaction we saw to the demands for airstrikes in Syria a few years ago, and people were popping up who I had sort of pigeonholed as pacifists, as people who were no friends of military action, and suddenly they were talking in incredibly intemperate language, very bellicose, very belligerent, almost jingoistic, and we're seeing it again, aren't we?
Well, George Galloway tweeted earlier today, scratch just underneath the skin of a liberal and you'll find an authoritarian totalitarian. And I sort of agree with him. It's very, very dangerous to try and stoke these flames as they are at the moment. And whether he's paranoid about COVID or not, we don't know. What we do know is at the touch of a button, he can wipe out the entire population of the earth.
Mm. Lawrence Fox, appreciate your time. Thanks very much indeed for joining us. Kathy Gingell is alongside me, was nodding along at various points of what Lawrence Fox had to say, and in particular just that, the last one, here is a man who really matters because of the power and sway he holds over us by dint of having all those nukes.
I think though I'd changed the tone of the argument a bit. The problem isn't so much that Putin is mad, but the West, and particularly Biden, is dumb. The Western people in the West must realise the consequences of this actually avoidable showdown that we are, which is now a nuclear consequence. And yes, we do, as Lawrence said, have a despot that might be prepared to switch that nuclear button. The nuclear deterrence has been the basis of our peace for how many years? Since the Second World War. And the West has walked into this mess. At every step we've underestimated what Putin would do. We say he wouldn't do it, and each time he has. So, like Lawrence, he could do this nuclear ban. So this is the time to really ramp down the chat. This is time to ramp down the virtual signalling outrage, much as there is outrage there. We now have a battle for who's the most outraged about it. The West's war of words and war of sanctions is only going to actually aggravate Putin more. as far as...
And just on my point, I mean, I know, again, I come back to my introduction there about the long table, long COVID, whatever it is in the mind of Vladimir Putin, I think we can... It's not unreasonable to assume that when you have somebody like him who's been in charge, total charge, for so many years, that he begins, perhaps, it would be unsurprising, would it not be, for him to lose a little bit of attachment?
Well, I think most people with supreme power are pretty bonkers. I mean, it goes with the thing. You don't get to be a dictator. You don't even get to be the head of a huge Facebook or whatever without actually something going to your head a bit. But to come back, the more he's treated like a pariah, and the West has treated him like a pariah. I'm not pro-Russia. I'm not pro-Putin, but I'm trying to stand back. If you treat somebody like a pariah long enough, they will go paranoid. And he has some reason about NATO on his doorsteps, as Lawrence said. We broke a promise to Gorbachev years ago. That's still with us, and we refuse to talk about that, the West.
Well, let's talk about that a little later on, Kathy. For now, let's talk about this, though. Another question. Has Germany been mugged by reality? Has it just shown the world the limits of green virtue signalling? My question prompted by the news that Germany is ready, it seems, to fire up some of the nuclear power stations it announced would be closed 10 years ago. That nuclear cancellation order was pretty doolally in the minds of many back then. If you remember, Berlin took the decision to can atomic power following an earthquake in Japan 9,000 miles away. The tsunami which wrecked the Fukushima nuclear power station was terrifying. I was one of those sent to Japan to report on it, but it was a reflection of local seismological conditions. Japan sits on the so-called Pacific Ring of Fire, an area of vulnerability to volcanoes and earthquakes. Germany does not. But the Germans did it anyway, and now they are repenting, it seems. Putin promised them that gas would take up the slack left by mothballed nuclear power stations, and naively, it seems, Germany took him at his word. Now they know better, and now they are ready to rekindle nuclear power. What a parable for our times. Joining me, Zion Lights, an environmentalist who came to the view that nuclear power ought to be embraced, not rejected, by the green lobby. Welcome to you, Zion Lights. Appreciate your time. Why should Germany go back to nuclear power?
Well, Germany is preparing a new package of energy legislation now, and it does look like they're reconsidering nuclear power, as after you say, they kind of had a knee-jerk reaction after the Fukushima Daiichi power plant meltdown, and they decided to phase out all of their reactors. They've still got a few operating, and they're now sort of saying maybe they could restart those. It will take time, but it's still quicker than building them new. So yeah, they're sort of starting to realise, I think. But it's ultimately a shame that it's taken this for them to realise that we probably shouldn't be dependent on Putin for so much of our energy. And I mean, Germany does get about 28% of the energy from Russia. They're Russia's top gas buyer. So it's very significant that this is happening now.
And they're burning coal again. I mean, whatever you feel about, nuclear power, Nein Danke, whatever you feel about nuclear power, it's, as you've come to realise, there are obviously problems with storing fissile material and all the rest of it, but it's clean energy. They're going back to burning coal in Germany.
Not just going back to burning coal, but so first of all, they decided to phase out nuclear before coal. So that was a big mistake. It's made it more difficult for them to phase out coal. But also, they import nuclear energy from France. So they've shut down their own nuclear reactors, and then they have to import it to fill the energy gap, because although they're building lots of renewables, it's not quite enough to cover, when it's not windy or sunny enough, it's just not enough to fill that energy gap, and it has to be filled somehow. And it's actually not just Germany. Belgium also is phasing out its reactors. It's phasing out the remaining 7 reactors by 2025. Where are they getting their gas from? Again, Russia. Also, Italy has phased out their reactors. This has happened across Europe, really.
I just wonder, can I invite you to share a view on the involvement of the Green Party in German politics? I know ultimately it was Angela Merkel's decision 11 years ago to close down nuclear, but there is a big Green Party lobby, and more than lobby, they're part of government in Germany. And this will strike some people, it strikes me, as an illustration of a utopian worldview, wishful thinking trumping the harsh realities of life.
Well, we have the Green Party member and Belgium Minister of Energy, Tin van der Straten, who is constantly saying we need 100% renewables. But if you look at the actual policy she's promoting, she's saying we shut down the nuclear power plants and we open gas-fired power plants. That's not up in the air. That's actually in their legislation. That's actually her plan, is to kind of promote renewables on the outside. But they know that they need a gas backup, and they've known for a long time that has had to come from Russia. That's why they've supported. Merkel was, very supportive of the Nord Stream pipeline, which is now also, in disarray. But we could have predicted quite a lot of this happening. It's not a good idea to be so energy dependent on somewhere like Russia, or really anywhere when you have the means to provide your own electricity at home.
Diane Lights, appreciate your time. Thanks very much indeed. Cathy Gingell is alongside me to reflect on the fact that what is happening in Ukraine, apart from anything else, is making people think hard about those questions that have been kicked down the road about where their energy comes from and how the lights stay on.
It's really ironic, isn't it, that you could be arguing we're on the cusp of a nuclear war because the West decided not to follow a policy of self-sufficiency in energy, but decided to follow a woke, climate-driven, angst energy policy, which has actually made us very weak. If you want to look at the strength of a country and why Putin thinks that we're so weak and he can walk in, is that countries that don't look after their borders and countries that don't understand that their strength is based on their energy supplies are very stupid. And in the West, we've all been very stupid. Here, we're still worrying about we talked about it when I was on the programme last time. If we want to be energy sufficient and not be dependent on anyone in this country, we have to go to fracking. So, it's all very well saying, oh, fracking is against the environment, this, that and the other, which it probably isn't. A nuclear bomb's a little bit more against the environment, I think.
That's the takeaway quote for this afternoon. Cathy, thanks very much. Here with Colin Brazier on GB News, on TV, online and on digital radio. Coming up on our show, Prince Charles has been in the Essex seaside resort of Southend-on-Sea to grant it city status. We'll tell you about that story. And also have a look at our Twitter poll today. We're giving £250 million in the form of foreign aid to Pakistan. They've just signed a big new trade deal. We'll tell you with who. Stay with us.
Hello again. Blue skies across the north today, cloudier skies further south. Most of us will be in the cloudier boat tomorrow with rain and drizzle in the west, but it should be another sunny day across northwest Scotland, where this area of high pressure will hold on. But down to the south, we've got low pressure and weather fronts which are slowly trudging northwards, certainly bringing a wet evening across Devon, Cornwall, much of Hampshire, and that rain extending across parts of southeast England and trickling into South Wales too. That rain will continue to spread into the Midlands also, but northern England northwards staying mostly dry and with clear skies. Across Scotland we will see a frost forming pretty quickly here this evening, and by dawn certainly in rural spots down to -3, -4. Further south, a long way from freezing. Temperatures in Cardiff and London to start Wednesday, 6 or 7 Celsius. But it will be grey, it will be damp. That rain will trickle into parts of northern England, particularly west of the Pennines. Parts of the northeast of England may stay dry. The rain will spread into Northern Ireland, so a very different day here and across North Wales compared to today. Eventually some of that rain will spread into southwest Scotland, but much of Scotland dry, and again that far northwest corner staying dry, fine and pretty sunny. Temperatures in the south quite mild, but not feeling all that mild with the dull and dank weather, which will continue to trickle northwards during the course of the evening, eventually clouding over across the northwest of Scotland. The rain tending to ease off in many areas, but another line of rain pushes into Wales and southwest England as we go into Thursday. And this line of rain is a slow-moving weather front which will only very gradually trickle into the Midlands, parts of northern England during the day on Thursday. Should brighten up in Northern Ireland, probably brightening up in Wales and southwest England during the day on Thursday as well, and staying largely dry across the eastern parts. Again, temperatures in the south double figures, further north 7, 8 or 9 Celsius. Goodbye.
I'm Liam Halligan. Join me every weekday at 1 p.m. for On the Money, your daily dose of economics, business and consumer news. I've got 25 years experience covering economics and finance. We hold grown-up discussions with a host of experts who really know their stuff. We can't buy gas and store it. That was a mistake, wasn't it?
I think it was a mistake.
Even you, Liam, don't have a crystal ball.
Inflation's a real threat.
Every weekday at 1, you're On the Money.
GB News is the UK's home of discussion and debate
from all perspectives.
To stay up to date on the latest stories,
make sure that you subscribe to the GB News channel
right here on YouTube.
You can watch us live 24/7 across the whole world.
You can also check out exclusive content and catch up on previous episodes of your favourite shows.
Every day, we ask the questions
that you'd ask, so why not add your voice to the conversation in the comments section?
Don't forget to subscribe. We are GB News, Britain's news channel.
Every night at 11 on GB News, we bring you the next day's stories the day before.
Basically like time travel.
If it's a big story, we'll cover it, guaranteed. But we'll also have some fun along the way.
Big opinions, big laughs. Sometimes big hair.
This is
Headliners, the paper review show that won't send you to sleep like the others will.
11 p.m, 7 nights a week. Join us.
Hello there, I'm Eamon Holmes.
And I'm Isabel Webster.
And we hope you can join us for
Breakfast with Eamon
and Isabel.
You make me laugh out loud, belly laugh.
Is that important first thing in the morning?
Yeah, absolutely.
And there's me trying to be deadly serious. News is a serious business.
Yeah, I have to rein you in sometimes.
Well, it doesn't stop us laughing at it. It doesn't stop us having an opinion on what's going on.
Yeah.
And it certainly will not stop us reflecting what you think.
Weekdays from 6 to 9:30 on GB News.
I'm Dan Wootton. Join me Monday to Thursday from 9 to 11 for the feistiest and most fun news debate on TV, where free speech reigns. I'll bring you a sharp take on the day's biggest stories, bombshell newsmaker interviews, and A-list guests. And I guarantee you, no spin, no bias, no censorship, and no reason to go to bed. That's Dan Wootton Tonight, Monday to Thursdays from 9 on GB News.
At Southend-on-Sea, now a city. We'll talk about that very shortly. But Cathy Gingell is alongside me. We were talking during the commercial break about oil prices, fuel prices, and actually how it's actually playing into Putin's hands in a way that not everybody, certainly I hadn't thought of. Explain.
Well, I think if anyone who looked at the sort of stock market today, the oil prices have absolutely surged. They're their highest point, I think, for about 14 years. Well, most of Putin's economic strength comes from his oil and gas supplies. So there is an argument that while he has no incentive to disengage from the war, while the oil prices are going up, that his war is causing to go up. Sorry, I have not explained that very well, Colin.
Very well, you made it perfectly well, which is that there is an inverse incentive for Putin to keep fighting, because instability means that oil prices stay high and his coffers get filled as well.
Basically, my bottom line point is we're on one level paying for his war.
There you are. You've done it again, very pithily. Thanks very much indeed, Cathy. Well, let's turn to Ellie Costello, who's down in Southend-on-Sea today. Prince Charles has been there. You'll remember, I'm sure, that the late MP for Southend was a passionate advocate for city status. And it's a dream that's been realised, Ellie.
It certainly is, Colin, and good afternoon from Britain's newest city, the city of Southend-on-Sea. And it has been a hugely emotional day, hugely joyful day for people that are living here. And it's been action-packed too. It started at the Civic Centre, which is about a mile up in this direction. And that is where the Prince of Wales and his wife, the Duchess of Cornwall, they presented letters patent to the Mayor of Southend. Now, that is an official document which is signed by the Queen, which officially gave the town city status. And then Prince Charles made a speech about Sir David Amess. They had met several times, and he recalled going to a concert with him several years ago, where he fondly recalled Sir David Amess speaking so passionately about this community. So that was a very emotional moment. And he also described the killing of Sir David Amess as an an attack on democracy, and he said what we're seeing in Ukraine now is an attack on those same values. So a very poignant speech from Prince Charles in that ceremony. After that finish, we then came down to the pier. This is the longest pleasure pier in the world here in Southend-on-Sea. It's just over a mile long, and here is where Prince Charles and his wife, the Duchess of Cornwall, they actually unveiled a new green eco train for the pier. It's going to run on lithium batteries instead of diesel, and that too has been named after Sir David Amess. And then they took their time to meet with the public outside the amusement park, which is just behind my shoulder here, and Prince Charles in particular really took the time to speak to local people, to thank them for coming out, and there were lots of people that were waving their Union Jack flags. It really was a sight to behold. And then finally they went into the restaurant just down here, which is called Sands by the Sea, and there was a reception there for volunteers from the RNLI lifeboats, from Her Majesty's Coast Guard, and also from businesses across Southend. And from what we could see outside, we were stuck outside in the rain, but from what we could see inside, there were chips going around in little cones and cups of tea as well. So very British, very English, and very Southend-on-Sea. But I think ultimately, Colin, this was very bittersweet for the people of Southend. Clearly emotional that their beloved MP, Sir David Amess, was not here to see the moment that he's so long campaigned for. But I think everyone was very much in agreement that this was a fitting tribute to the man that was so affectionately named Mr. Southend.
Ellie Costello there in Southend for us today. Ellie, thanks very much indeed. Now, what do you think of foreign aid? About 0.5% of GDP. It's less than it was at the moment, about 12-13 billion pounds a year we give in foreign aid to other countries. One of the biggest recipients of our foreign aid, Pakistan, gets about £250 million of taxpayers' money in this year. Well, where was the Pakistani leader, Imran Khan, their prime minister, in the last few days, cozying up to Vladimir Putin, signing a huge new trade deal for 2 million tonnes of wheat and lots of gas. We've been asking you what you make of this. Should we be supporting through foreign aid regimes which increasingly seem keener on Vladimir Putin than they do with an alliance with the West? I don't know if we can show you the poll we've commissioned on Twitter, but you're heavily against the idea. We'll take you through the results in a wee while. In the meantime, we'll bring you up to date with the latest news headlines.
Thanks, Colin. It's 4:32. I'm Rhiannon Jones in the GB newsroom. The UK has stepped up sanctions against Russia, banning all ships with any connection to the country from entering British ports. The Prime Minister's now in Estonia, having met with his counterpart in Poland this morning. Speaking at the Tapa military base, Boris Johnson said the UK and its allies must isolate Vladimir Putin from the international community.
It's clearer, day by day, from the way the Ukrainians are responding, that President Putin has made a disastrous miscalculation. His troops have not been welcomed into Ukraine as he prophesied, and instead the Ukrainians have mounted an astonishing and tenacious resistance.
Ukraine is facing another day of heavy bombardment. The Foreign Ministry has released video footage of a missile hitting a government building in Kharkiv. The Interior Ministry says at least 10 people have been killed in rocket attacks in the city so far today. As a massive Russian convoy rumbles towards the Ukrainian capital, Kiev, the United Nations says more than 660,000 refugees have fled to neighbouring countries. Home Secretary Priti Patel told MPs that more Ukrainians will be eligible to seek refuge in the UK through both the family and the sponsorship route. The Chief Prosecutor of the International Criminal Court says he'll open an investigation into possible war crimes in Ukraine. Amnesty International says cluster bombs hit a nursery last week, and Ukraine's ambassador to the US says Russia has used vacuum bombs. Both are banned under the Geneva Convention. In an address to the European Parliament, Ukraine's president accused Russia of targeting civilians.
Nobody's going to break us. We are strong. We are Ukrainians. We want our children to live. It seems to me that is fair. Yesterday, 16 children died, and again, President Putin will say that this is an operation and we are beating the military infrastructure. Where are our children? What military factories do they work at? On which rockets? Maybe they ride in tanks.
Vladimir Zelensky there. TV, online and DAB Plus radio. This is GB News. We'll have a full update for you at the top of the hour. It's back to Brazier in just a moment.
GB News is the UK's home of discussion and debate.
From all perspectives.
To stay up to date on the latest stories,
make sure that you subscribe to the GB News channel.
Right here on YouTube.
You can watch us live 24/7 across the whole world.
You can also check out exclusive content and catch up on previous episodes of your favourite shows.
Every day, we ask the questions
that you'd ask, so why not add your voice to the conversation in the comments section?
Don't forget to subscribe. We are GB News, Britain's news channel.
Every night at 11 on GB News, we bring you the next day's stories the day before.
It's basically like time travel.
If it's a big story, we'll cover it, guaranteed. But we'll also have some fun along the way.
Big opinions, big laughs. Sometimes big hair.
This is
Headliners, the paper review show that won't send you to sleep like the others will.
11 p.m, 7 nights a week. Join us.
Hello there, I'm Eamon Holmes.
And I'm Isabel Webster.
And we hope you can join us for
Breakfast with Eamon
and Isabel.
You make me laugh out loud, belly laugh.
Is that important first thing in the morning?
Yeah, absolutely.
And there's me trying to be deadly serious. News is a serious business.
Yeah, I have to rein you in sometimes.
Well, it doesn't stop us laughing at it. It doesn't stop us having an opinion on what's going on.
Yeah.
And it certainly will not stop us reflecting what you think.
Weekdays from 6 to 9:30 on GB News.
I'm Dan Wootton. Join me Monday to Thursday from 9 to 11 for the feistiest and most fun news debate on TV, where free speech reigns. I'll bring you a sharp take on the day's biggest stories, bombshell newsmaker interviews, and A-list guests. And I guarantee you, no spin, no bias, no censorship, and no reason to go to bed. That's Dan Wootton tonight, Monday to Thursdays from 9 on GB News.
Welcome back. You're with Colin Brazier on GB News, on TV, online and on digital radio. Now, Putin is a gangster, say many. He's a terrifying thug and bully, and we're told to stand up to bullies. But this isn't a playground, it's real life, and Putin controls the world's largest stockpile of nukes. So how far should we go to poke the Russian bear? It's one thing to send guns, but what about a no-fly zone with British pilots potentially shooting down Russian planes? Surely that is too far. And what about some of the rhetoric right now? Why are some commentators who would see themselves as liberal and pacifist and no fans of our armed forces now sounding really quite so jingoistic? These are people who say they like to be nuanced, but for whom Putin is now nothing more than a panto villain who can only do wrong. So our debate, how far can we push Russia without starting, there's no point glossing it, World War III? Joining me to debate this, the political commentator Dominic Samuels and Sam Armstrong from the Henry Jackson Society to ponder what this means and how, as a country, as a nation, to respond at this trying moment in European history. Dominic Samuels and Sam Armstrong, welcome to you. Dominic, let's start with you if I can. I think you broadly agree with my premise there that there is a danger we talk ourselves into a much bigger conflict if we're not careful.
There is a great danger of this, and I think a lot of people are really viewing this conflict as though it's some sort of video game, as if we're in Call of Duty, and we're not. This is real life. We're talking about nuclear weapons. The US and Russia together control 90% of the world's nuclear weapons. Russia has the second largest air force next to America. So this idea that, you know, NATO should put in place a no-fly zone will dissuade Russian planes, it's quite simply not true. All that would lead to is Russian planes being shot down and the announcement of World War III and potentially nuclear warfare. This isn't a game. And I don't think that having this opinion means you're some kind of Russian stooge or you want to bow to Putin. It means that you want to save lives. It means that you don't want people to die unnecessarily. And the fact of the matter is, the US nor the UK is committing to troops on the ground because we know what that risk would be. So why are we prolonging the suffering of the Ukrainian people? To me, it's a bit of a mystery.
Sam Armstrong, we want to be sympathetic, helpful as we possibly can be to Ukraine, but not at the risk of the incineration of the homes where we live.
Yeah, well, let's just pick up a couple of points there. Firstly, yes, it's absolutely true that Vladimir Putin controls a very powerful army. In the Second World War, so did the Nazis and so did Imperial Japan. It didn't stop us calling them out unequivocally, calling them what they were, murderous, barbarous dictators, hell-bent on global domination. Putin isn't hell-bent on global domination, but he certainly is on regional domination, and we should call it what it is. Now, in terms of prolonging the warfare by supporting Ukraine, well, that seems to be suggesting that just because Putin is a powerful person, just because he has a nuclear arsenal, we should let him walk all over wherever he wants to. That is just completely wrong and unacceptable. Where on earth would that sort of thing end?
Well, can we just talk specifics here? Sam Armstrong, where do you stand on a no-fly zone?
I think no-fly zone is difficult. I would be in favour of what I would call a safe zone, which is we move NATO troops immediately into 3 or 4 western Ukrainian provinces, several hundred miles away from where Russian troops are. And let's be clear, Vladimir Putin still says he's not trying to take over Ukraine. He's trying to denazify and bring justice and take only some eastern independent bits. He's lying, we know that, but these would be several hundred miles away. And from there, we could build a safe zone. Now, the risk is, were Ukraine to fall, it could lead to the permanent partition of Ukraine. But the benefit would be is that while Russian troops are indiscriminately shelling civilian populations, that they would have somewhere to flee within their own country without having to abandon the only place they've ever called home.
Dominic Samuels, Sam Armstrong there is likening the Putin regime to the Hitlerite regime of the Nazis. Is that a fair comparison?
I don't really think comparisons like this are helpful, because I don't think you can compare what's going on to what went on in Nazi Germany or the ambitions of Hitler. It's just quite frankly not true. From my understanding of the subject, Putin's problem is the fact that the Ukraine is becoming increasingly close to NATO, increasingly close to the US. And if you look at the Eastern European countries that have become part of NATO, Russia is in many ways surrounded by NATO countries, and he's always said that if Ukraine became part of NATO, it just wouldn't be acceptable. That's partly why he also invaded Georgia. It's partly why he annexed Crimea as well. He's made very clear that he's prepared to go nuclear on this issue. My approach to this, and the reason why your approach isn't very realistic, is because Joe Biden and our Prime Minister has already said that putting troops on the ground would run the risk of direct conflict with Russia. And that's something we're quite frankly not prepared to do, because Ukraine is not a NATO country and it doesn't present a clear strategic interest to the United States. It just doesn't. Yeah. So what I would do, my solution would be, is to legally recognise the annexation of Crimea and allow Russia to have the parts of eastern Ukraine that he's already declared independent, and allow western Ukraine to remain neutral. It can have as much influence in terms of, politically with the West as much as it likes. But I think that Ukraine should be separated into the West and the East, because they're already very divided anyway, ethnically, linguistically, and politically. I think that would be the end of the conflict, because this is not ending anytime soon unless we have some sort of discussion and broker some sort of peace.
Sam Armstrong.
Well, firstly, there have been no moves from Ukraine since at least 2014 towards NATO membership. It's bizarre to suggest that this was provoked in any which way,
That's not
form.
not true. Sorry, that's not true. Just last year, Vladimir Zelensky was demanding that the Ukraine's accession to NATO be sped up. There was a meeting in December 2021 between Biden and Putin, where Putin said that 2008 promises by NATO during the Bucharest summit that Georgia and Ukraine would eventually join NATO. He asked for that to be disavowed. It wasn't. We had every opportunity to say that wouldn't happen.
OK, Sam Armstrong?
Firstly, I disagree with that analysis, and Georgia isn't joining NATO. In fact, it's not even letting its own citizens go over to Ukraine. And secondly, NATO is a voluntary organisation that any country that wishes to can join. It's not an aggressive organisation, it's a defensive one. Any country can join it. Dominic, your position is that a dictator in Moscow should be able to decide which countries can and cannot join organisations, and that their people should be banned from making decisions in order to join them. I put it to you that you wouldn't for a minute accept that kind of threat towards the UK, and that there is something in your mind that says that the choices of the Ukrainian people are in some way less legitimate than the choices we make here for ourselves.
Well, can I answer that question? Can I answer that question? Of course they are, Sam. We live here. Our families live here. Of course we're going to apply a different moral standard.
What? But are we expecting somehow to the Ukrainians to apply a different standard to themselves, to not defend their own right to make choices that they wish to make?
Dominic, go on. Reality. This is the reality of power politics and international relations. I'm afraid the vast majority of wars are not waged because of flowers, roses, and democracy. They're waged because of strategic interest. Yeah. The Ukraine does not present a strategic interest to America. It just doesn't. There's no need for Ukraine to be closer with the West, and there's no need for Ukraine to join NATO.
Can I just ask sorry, Dominic, can I just ask a specific question? Because I know you rhetorically you're miles apart, but I just wonder practically whether you're actually so very far apart, because I'm not sure, Dominic, whether you're saying that you wouldn't tolerate, for instance, a much bigger, say, NATO army, British army presence in a country like Estonia or Poland or Romania or Slovakia, or are you saying actually we shouldn't be doing that either?
Let's think of it like this. Imagine if China all of a sudden decided it wanted to station missiles and troops in Mexico and Canada. According to the Monroe Doctrine of the late 1800s in America, that wouldn't be acceptable. The Cuban Missile Crisis started precisely because Russia wanted to station missiles in Cuba that would be pointing directly at America. If the shoe was on the other foot, it wouldn't be acceptable. And we've always had countries throughout history, throughout the Cold War, that act as surveyors of influence and buffer zones.
I get that, Dominic, but just on the specifics, just on that very specific point, you've got a very clear plan about what we do with Ukraine, and people will get the logic behind that. But there's an argument that says Ukraine's gone, de facto, we have to live with it. But in countries like Estonia and Poland, Article 5, NATO obligation that we have legally enshrined to go in and fight for them if it comes to it, would you be against us sending, as we are now sending, Boris Johnson in Poland and Estonia today, potentially thousands of extra British soldiers?
No, because the problem with that is when we announced that countries such as Poland would be joining NATO, I think in 1999, Russia initially didn't like that, but it allowed it to go through with it because it was receiving assurances that it wasn't going to present a threat to Russia. So I agree with that premise. Russia didn't really have a problem with that at the time. So if Poland were to come under attack, for example, of course I would back NATO with that all the way.
Sam Armstrong, your thoughts?
Well, I agree with you. There is a sense to which our own positions aren't a million miles away, in that Dominic supports troops going all the way across to Poland, and I support the countries immediately across the border, that is Ukraine and Finland, to join NATO should they so wish. But on the matter of principle, we could not be further apart. My position is very clear. Any country around the world whose democratic government, let's not compare it to Cuba, which is a violent, murderous dictatorship, any democratic country that decides to join any international body of any type or any variety ought to be able to do so. And we in the West, and Vladimir Putin in Moscow, and Premier Xi in Beijing have no right at all to start telling other countries that they can't make democratic decisions. And it makes me sick with sadness and disappointment in this country that we would ever think or ever have a significant school of thought that says countries around the world should not be allowed to take democratic decisions that they choose to. It's as simple as that.
Guys, we've got to leave it there. There's a lot more we could talk about, but I think you've introduced some interesting concepts to our viewers this afternoon. Dominic Samuels and Sam Armstrong. Thanks both very much indeed for your time today. Some breaking news for you. MPs are to get a pay rise. They will receive, that's Cathy Giddengle, they will receive £2,212 more for the year from the 1st of April, increasing their pay by 2.7% from £81,932 to £84,144, the Independent Parliamentary Standards Authority have announced. Cathy Giddengle alongside me. We should pay our MPs more. We want good people.
Yes, there's an argument for paying our MPs more, but there's an argument about being totally tin-eared when you're putting the cost of living up for every family in the country by about that amount.
There are tube strikers on strike in London today. Some of them earn £60,000 a year, not much less than an MP.
It's true, but the MPs spend our money or don't stop the government spending our money absolutely recklessly, which means taxes are going up, energy is going up. Well, then maybe it's nice the MPs will have some money to pay their energy bills, but the rest of the poor people out there won't. The hard-pressed families, the pensioners, the single mums, who's paying their energy bills? So, yes, in principle, if they all acted more responsibly with our money.
Always making it very clear. Yeah. Thanks. You're with Colin Brazier on GBNews, on TV, online and on digital radio. Coming up, what your food cravings say about your mind, body and health. Talking to a doctor on that one. But first, let's have a look at the weather for you.
Hello again. Blue skies across the north today, cloudier skies further south. Most of us will be in the cloudier boat tomorrow with rain and drizzle in the west, but it should be another sunny day across northwest Scotland, where this area of high pressure will hold on. But down to the south, we've got low pressure and weather fronts, which are slowly trudging northwards, certainly bringing a wet evening across Devon, Cornwall, much of Hampshire, and that rain extending across parts of southeast England and trickling into South Wales too. That rain will continue to spread into the Midlands also, but northern England northwards staying mostly dry and with clear skies. Across Scotland, we will see a frost forming pretty quickly here this evening, and by dawn, certainly in rural spots, down to -3, -4. Further south, a long way from freezing. Temperatures in Cardiff and London to start Wednesday, 6 or 7 Celsius. But it will be grey, it will be damp. That rain will trickle into parts of northern England, particularly west of the Pennines. Parts of the northeast of England may stay dry. The rain will spread into Northern Ireland, so a very different day here and across North Wales compared to today. Eventually, some of that rain will spread into southwest Scotland, but much of Scotland dry, and again, that far northwest corner staying dry, fine, and pretty sunny. Temperatures in the south quite mild, but not feeling all that mild with the dull and dank weather, which will continue to trickle northwards during the course of the evening, eventually clouding over across the northwest of Scotland. The rain tending to ease off in many areas, but another line of rain pushes into Wales and southwest England as we go into Thursday. And this line of rain is a slow-moving weather front, which will only very gradually trickle into the Midlands, parts of northern England during the day on Thursday. Should brighten up in Northern Ireland, probably brightening up in Wales and southwest England during the day on Thursday as well, and staying largely dry across the eastern parts. Again, temperatures in the south, double figures, further north, 7, 8 or 9 Celsius. Goodbye.
Hello, I'm Patrick Christie's.
And I'm Mercy Moroki.
Make sure that you join us Monday to Thursday, 10 a.m. until midday, right here on GB News for To The Point.
We're not afraid to talk about the topics that matter to you or the big topics that always matter.
We cover absolutely everything, from the breaking political stories of the day to law and order, what's going on in the channel. We're not afraid to hold people to account.
We always make sure we include your views on our show.
Indeed, if you're thinking it, you can guarantee that we're saying it. So make sure you join the conversation with us, 10 a.m. until midday, Monday to Thursday, for To The Point on GB News.
GB News is the UK's home of discussion and debate
from all perspectives.
To stay up to date on the latest stories,
make sure that you subscribe to the GB News channel
right here on YouTube.
You can watch us live 24/7 across the whole world.
You can also check out exclusive content and catch up on previous episodes of your favourite shows.
Every day, we ask the questions
that you'd ask, so why not add your voice to the conversation in the comments section?
Don't forget to subscribe. We are GB News, Britain's news channel.
Every night at 11 on GB News, we bring you the next day's stories the day before.
It's basically like time travel.
If it's a big story, we'll cover it, guaranteed. But we'll also have some fun along the way.
Big opinions, big laughs. Sometimes big hair.
This is
Headliners, the paper review show that won't send you to sleep like the others will.
11 p.m, 7 nights a week. Join us.
Hello there, I'm Eamon Holmes.
And I'm Isabel Webster.
And we hope you can join us for
Breakfast with Eamon.
And Isabel.
You make me laugh out loud, belly laugh.
Is that important first thing in the morning?
Yeah, absolutely.
And there's me trying to be deadly serious. News is a serious business.
Yeah, I have to rein you in sometimes.
Well, it doesn't stop us laughing at it. It doesn't stop us having an opinion on what's going on.
Yeah.
And it certainly will not stop us reflecting what you think.
Weekdays from 6 to 9:30 on GB News.
I'm Dan Wootton. Join me Monday to Thursday from 9 to 11 for the feistiest and most fun news debate on TV, where free speech reigns. I'll bring you a sharp take on the day's biggest stories, bombshell newsmaker interviews, and A-list guests. And I guarantee you, no spin, no bias, no censorship, and no reason to go to bed. That's Dan Wootton tonight, Monday to Thursdays from 9 on GB News.
Welcome back. You're with Colin Brazier on GB News, on TV, online and on digital radio. We are going to just move away from Ukraine, at least for a wee while, and talk about this, an intense desire for eating or drinking something specific, a craving, in other words. Most of us have experienced it. Have you imagined what these food and drink cravings mean to your body, that relationship between body and mind, why that process begins to happen? Do they, for example, mean you need extra minerals, supplements, or indeed just some extra sleep? Joining me is Dr. Ethan Smallwood, an NHS doctor who's been looking at this particular study and what it might betoken. Ethan, thanks so much for your time. Nothing happens to the human body that doesn't have an evolutionary basis, I'm guessing. And if there is a craving, that's there to serve a purpose. But what purpose?
Yeah, well, thanks, Colin, for having me on. I think it's an interesting subject. Could cravings indicate a nutritional deficiency? Possibly. Although I think, on the whole, there are probably far more likely reasons. Simple things that we all experience are high stress, effects to our sleep, our hydration levels, or even just the psychological aspect of if we cut a certain food out, we might want it more than usual. So lots of reasons, and I think, we don't want to oversimplify it just to being on a deficiency.
I was reading at least a write-up of this particular study, and it was saying, for instance, if you've got a mineral imbalance, that might be behind a craving for salt. Sometimes if you're really hankering after chocolate, that may say something about magnesium, or was it potassium? I never paid quite enough attention during those chemistry classes, which you clearly did.
Yeah, again, I think they're interesting statements. If people are worried about a mineral deficiency, I'd much rather they go into their GP and, get the blood test to find out if that is the case. There has been some studies that, might see a link that if you are low in sodium levels, that you might have more of a preference for salty foods. But I think to categorically say that, I don't think we can say that right now. And if you are worried, go and see your doctor.
A final thought, really, Ethan. I just wonder, I know we always end, a lot of my conversations with frontline clinicians end up with the defaulting to that line, if you're worried, go and see your doctor. I just wonder if that's absolutely true right now, given the fact we've got this gigantic backlog of people with really potentially serious conditions. There are certain red flags that you want somebody to come and see you about. I'm not sure a craving is one of them.
I think if anybody's worried about any health concern, I'd always recommend they go into the doctor. The issue with certain mineral deficiencies, common ones we see, vitamin D, iron, these sorts of vitamins and minerals, they can present quite non-specifically. So it might just be things, as obvious as kind of tiredness, fatigue. So, I appreciate, there is a backlog, as you might say, but, if anyone's got a problem, always go and see your GP. Well, that's what, doctors are here for.
Exactly so. Ethan, thanks very much indeed for your time. Thanks a lot. Kathy's alongside me to reflect on that story and any other stories we've been covering this hour. If I'm tired, that's normally reflecting a craving I've had the night before for booze.
It may be, or you need a bit more sleep. I mean, no, you don't. There's so many things you can sort out yourself and take responsibility for yourself, for heaven's sake. I mean, we all know sugar, pure, white and deadly. We know sugar's like alcohol. We know it's like drugs. We know it's addictive. For heaven's sake, we've just got to get a grip on ourselves. That's what it is. Cut out sugar, force yourself to cut out sugar for a while, your addiction to it drops. You know, the more sugar you have, you get highs and lows. I mean, you don't have to be a doctor to know why people get addicted to sweet things and have cravings, do you?
I wish you'd done that interview. You'd have been far less forgiving than I would have been.
Yeah, I know. We can't be telling everyone to go to the doctor for everything.
Kathy, more from you a little later on. It's coming up to 5 o'clock. Do let us know your thoughts on that Twitter poll. We're talking about foreign aid in the context of the fact we've got, what is it, a quarter of a billion, in excess of a quarter of £1 billion, 300 billion, goes to Pakistan, who've just signed a major new trade deal with, guess who? Vladimir Putin. It's 5 o'clock. So, coming up live at 5, as Imran Khan signs a major trade deal with Vladimir Putin, why are British taxpayers still handing over a quarter of £1 billion in foreign aid to Pakistan? Also, if Germany is ready to restart its nuclear power stations because it can't rely on Russian gas, why shouldn't we restart fracking? And the supermarket chain, which is opening up a special aisle for shoppers who want to chat with checkout staff. In Britain, we now have 8 million folk who live alone. I'll discuss why a trip to pick up the groceries is an opportunity for social contact that should not be sniffed at. Alongside me throughout the hour, the commentator Kathy Gingell. But first, we have the headlines with Rhiannon.
Thank you, Colin. Good afternoon. It's 1 minute past 5. Here are your top stories from the GB newsroom. The UK has stepped up sanctions against Russia, banning all ships with any connection to the country from entering British ports. The Prime Minister is currently in Estonia. He held a joint conference with the country's Prime Minister Kaja Kallas earlier, who said Belarusian troops were also part of the invasion force in Ukraine. Speaking at the Tampa military base, Boris Johnson said the UK and its allies must isolate Vladimir Putin from the international community.
It's clearer, day by day, from the way the Ukrainians are responding, that President Putin has made a disastrous miscalculation. His troops have not been welcomed into Ukraine as he prophesied, and instead the Ukrainians have mounted an astonishing and tenacious resistance.
This morning at a conference in Poland, a Ukrainian activist challenged Boris Johnson over introducing a no-fly zone and appealed for more help to protect Ukraine's citizens.
Britain guaranteed our security under Budapest Memorandum, so you're coming to Poland. You're not coming to Kiev, Prime Minister. You're not coming to Lviv because you're afraid, because NATO is not willing to defend, because NATO is afraid of the World War III, but it is already started. Putin's children are in Netherlands, in Germany, in mansions. Where are all these mansions seized? I don't see that. I see that my family members, that my team members are saying that we are crying. We don't have where to run.
And clearly very emotional there. That as Ukraine has faced another day of heavy shelling. The Foreign Ministry released video footage of a missile hitting a government building in Kharkiv this morning. The Interior Ministry says at least 10 people have been killed and 35 wounded in rocket strikes by Russian forces in the city so far today. There was a mass walkout from the UN Human Rights Council as the Russian foreign minister began speaking earlier. Diplomats and ambassadors left the room as a video message from Sergei Lavrov began to play at the conference on disarmament. Foreign Secretary Liz Truss says his statement was full of disinformation and didn't deserve their attention. Lavrov was unable to travel to Geneva because of the EU ban on Russian flights. He criticised European and UK sanctions against his country. As a massive Russian convoy makes its way towards the Ukrainian capital, Kiev, the United Nations says more than 660,000 refugees have already fled to neighbouring countries. Home Secretary Priti Patel told MPs that more Ukrainians will be eligible to seek refuge in the UK through both the family and the sponsorship route.
Firstly, we are establishing an expansive Ukrainian family scheme so that British nationals and people settled in the UK can bring a wider group of family members to the UK, extending eligibility to parents, grandparents, adult offspring, siblings and their immediate family members. Again, the scheme will be free. Those joining family in the UK will be granted leave for an initial period of 12 months. They will be able to work and access public funds. Secondly, we will establish a humanitarian sponsorship pathway, which will open up a route to the UK for Ukrainians who may not have family ties with the UK.
And in response to Home Secretary's announcements over visa plans for Ukrainians, Labour leader Sir Keir Starmer says the UK needs to go further.
Of course, we need to ramp up even more the economic sanctions, and there's a frustration that whilst we'll vote with the government on sanctions, we want them to go further, we want them to go faster. And of course, on the humanitarian front, we're seeing people fleeing Ukraine, and we must do as we've historically done, which is to give them the support that they need. A simple route to sanctuary is what we're seeking. And I don't think the Home Office and the Home Secretary have gone far enough.
The UK government's being accused of adding to the cost of living crisis following the biggest rise in rail fares in 9 years. From today, ticket prices in England and Wales are 3.8% more expensive. The Campaign for Better Transport says the hike couldn't come at a worse time for commuters. And Southend has officially become a city today. On behalf of the Queen, Prince Charles presented the letters patent during a ceremony that formally granted its city status. The late Conservative MP for Southend, Sir David Amess, had campaigned for this before he was stabbed to death in October last year. This is GB News. We'll bring you more as it happens. Now, though, it's back to Brazier.
Well, I make no apologies if the next item sounds a bit macabre, that those are the days we're living through, it seems right now. This is something that sucks in oxygen from the surrounding air to generate a high-temperature explosion that can be as destructive as some nuclear bombs. They're called vacuum bombs, and the Ukrainian ambassador to the United States says Russia is using them in their invasion of his country. Verified footage has also emerged of Russia using cluster bombs, which are banned by the international community in some urban areas. All lethal weapons by their nature obviously kill, but do these cross some sort of invisible and sometimes visible ethical line? Joining me, Peter Felsted, the defence consultant and former editor of Jane's Defence Weekly. Thanks for your time. Shall we start with these vacuum bombs, how they work and what they're attempting to achieve?
Well, they're typically also known as thermobaric weapons, and they are a two-stage munition. So what actually happens is that the first detonation will actually put into the air a cloud of basically fuel, ignitable fuel, and then the second detonation will ignite that fuel cloud. Now, what it does is it creates a very large pressure wave that is much longer than the average conventional high explosive warhead. And what this can do is it can just send shock waves through the target, which could be a bunker. They've been used by the coalition against Al-Qaeda in the mountain caves. That would be a typical use. You wouldn't expect to see them used against apartment blocks where you know there are civilians, and that almost, I mean, it just contravenes international humanitarian law.
There's obviously a fine legal point behind that distinction between how you're killed by a vacuum bomb, Peter, and, say, another type of munition. I'm always slightly puzzled by it, I have to say, whether you're killed in a firestorm, whether you're killed by a shockwave, whether you're killed by a cluster bomb. You die writhing in agony if you're unlucky. You die quickly if you're lucky. I mean, that's the brute logic of this thing.
Well, I mean, there are legitimate uses for these weapons. For example, thermobaric warheads can be used to clear a path through a minefield, for example, because the pressure wave will actually detonate the mines, clear a lane through the minefield. It's really about whether civilians are being targeted as opposed to the weapon itself. Although obviously many countries have signed up against the use of cluster munitions, for example, and we can see that the Russians are using those. So it's the fact that not only are they being indiscriminate, I don't think they're even thinking about civilian casualties. I don't think they care.
No, I think you're probably right. And I mean, the point about the cluster munitions is, they're fantastic, if that's the right word, at clearing a given area that's full of soldiers with thin-skinned vehicles, light-skinned vehicles. But they're also, very good at killing people when they land on a shopping mall, as happened, a government building, or indeed a housing development. In terms of, I'm just curious about the language here. People have been talking a lot about defensive weapons. We've supplied these anti-tank weapons to the Ukrainians, and we've called them defensive weapons. If you're sitting, Peter, inside a Russian armoured personnel carrier or a main battle tank, and one of those things comes through the armour, they don't feel very defensive, do they?
Well, there's a difference between these kind of tactical anti-armour and indeed anti-aircraft weapons. So they're small man-portable systems. They've got a relatively short range, and they're very much for defending a position. Whereas what we're seeing from the Russians now, and then the campaign is really entering a much bloodier phase, we have to admit that, and deliberately so on the part of the Russians. They're now using multiple rocket launchers that have ranges of 70 kilometers and above. And I think they're just going to be prepared to stand off the major cities within Ukraine and just pulverize them. And we've seen them do that before in Chechnya, for example.
Well, you took the words, Peter, you took the words out of my mouth. I just keep thinking about Grozny in Chechnya, where at the end they were just rearranging the rubble, weren't they?
Yeah, I mean, the footage that you've just showed there, that could well have been an Iskander tactical ballistic missile, which is exactly the kind of weapon that was used to flatten Grozny.
Just while we've got your expertise, Peter, we were talking yesterday in one of our editorial meetings about the fact that we lack this language. There is a sort of degree of military illiteracy now. The number of people who serve in our armed forces has been dwindling over the years. There's nothing like national service anymore, etc., etc. So, for instance, and indeed even people who lived through the Cold War, you've probably got to be younger than 40 to get the sort of dynamics of the Cold War. And we were having a conversation about nuclear weapons, and people just sort of put them in one great big basket. But as you know, there's an enormous difference between a tactical battlefield weapon used to clear an area in the context of a battle, and the sort of nuclear mushroom cloud that people imagine rising over London, let's say.
Well, yes, and I think you do have to look to the population, and most of the population now these days are lucky enough not to have lived through a high-level state-on-state conflict. Obviously, we had the campaigns in Iraq and Afghanistan, but those were counterinsurgency campaigns. There was never any major dimension, never any threat of London being bombed, for example. So you're really at the level now where in the population there are very few people who had fathers and uncles that served in the Second World War anymore. For example, you've got to be my age or older for that to be true. And I think people fail to realise sometimes the sacrifices that have to be made to secure your homeland. And now, no doubt, people are going to complain about petrol prices and all kinds of things in this country as a result of the sanctions and Russian retaliation for those. But they should think carefully about that, because it's not London that's being bombed like Kiev or Kharkiv right now.
Is alongside me. To Peter's point there about there being a generational gap, and the people who remember war in this country by and large have left us now. yesterday, or was it the day before at least, Germany announced it was rearming. 100 million euros to go on guns and weapons for the German army. 20 years ago, that would have been I'm not going to use the word I was about to use. It would have been very controversial in this country.
Yes, indeed. I mean, at least a sense of reality is possibly coming to them. As I said before, without a decent defence force, your country is not defendable.
No, but that's not my point, Cathy, is it? My point is that there would be nervousness in this country.
It's not the point. But also there's so much, there would have been nervousness indeed. And in a way, I'm still don't feel that particularly happy about it. I would far rather we had a very strong NATO, which we don't. We have a weakened NATO in which Germany had put more money into. They were doing less than 2%. Most of the European countries were barely doing 2%. We are paying the price of being so weak for so many years. So the real answer is not for Germany to rearm as such, but to actually commit much, much more strongly to NATO than it's been doing. And the same for every European country. Macron, the whole lot. But they didn't. They wanted an EU army. They didn't want NATO. They've been hubristic. And it's about time that they realise they've got that very wrong.
We were talking during the commercial break about a dinner you were at with the late Margaret Thatcher when she talked about how she felt the West got it wrong with Russia. Well,
she said, I mean, first of all, I want to say about Mrs. Thatcher and every strong leader, they always think that you should jaw rather than war if you can. She took her decision on the Falklands with the help of America behind her, but she took it as an informed and final decision. She had no alternative in order to secure the sovereignty. But and strong leaders can talk as well as they can war. We have got so much huff and puff here that is absolutely meaningless, that either will aggravate Putin or loved him. I think she would have certainly tried to have talked to him, but going back to her regrets on our relationship with the post-Soviet Union, the new Russia, what I overheard her say at a party was that she thought that democracy and freedom would follow the free market being introduced there. It didn't. They needed the rule of law. We should have helped them with the rule of law. And as we all know, Russia is still a country that doesn't have a rule of law that we would approve of.
It's really hard to create a culture of lawfulness. We'll talk about that maybe some other time. We're just talking about Germany, has Germany been mugged by reality? Has it just shown the world the limits of green virtue signalling? My question, it's prompted by the news that Germany is ready to fire up some of the nuclear power stations it announced would be closed 10 years ago. That nuclear cancellation order was pretty unhinged in the minds of some then. If you remember, Berlin took the decision to can atomic power following an earthquake in Japan, 9,000 miles away. The tsunami which wrecked the Fukushima nuclear power station was terrifying indeed. I was one of those sent to Japan to report on it, but it was a reflection of local seismological conditions. Japan sits on the so-called Pacific Ring of Fire, an area of vulnerability to volcanoes and earthquakes. Germany does not. But the Germans did it anyway, and now they are, it seems, repenting. Putin promised them that gas would take up the slack left by mothballed nuclear power stations, and I think in the eyes of many, naively, Germany took him at his word. Now they know better, and now they are ready to rekindle nuclear power. What a parable you might think that is for our times. Joining me now, Dr. Benny Peiser, the Chief Exec of Net Zero Watch. Dr. Peiser, thanks so much for your time. Is this a parable, do you think, for how good intentions can lead you to a fairly hellish outcome?
Yeah, indeed. Not just for Germany, for the whole of Europe. It's a wake-up call. Everything has changed. And within a few days, the whole energy policy of the last 30, 40 years has gone out of the window. Germany, it's not so much that they are restarting nuclear power plants. They're not going to restart decommissioned power plants. It's about the still running nuclear power plants, whether the phase out, they are about to be shut down at the end of this year. And the government is considering to delay the shutdown to extend their life. And the same also with coal. The German policy, like the British policy, is based on renewable energy, and that requires a lot of gas. So the Germans thought, well, we go for nuclear, for renewable energy, and then the Russians will provide us all the gas that is required. And the Germans were thinking of building roughly between 50 and 100 new gas-fired power plants to replace the nuclear and the coal-fired power plants. Now, this is, as I said, bombed to, to little pieces. The whole policy has gone up in smoke, and they are now talking about
literally it's gone up in smoke. They're having to burn coal, for heaven's sake.
Yes, and they will continue to burn coal like Italy. Italy just said they will actually restart, shut down coal power plants. And other European countries will follow. They will go for coal because there is enough coal and it's secure and you don't have to rely on Russia. You can get it everywhere. And that is the naivety of an energy policy that was always based on utopia and never realistic.
Did the French? I mean, I was talking to somebody recently who just said, "Look, none of these decisions were made last week. When it comes to Russia, it's like a series of chess moves, and it's taken decades to get here." So we look at the wisdom, I would say, of the French in embracing nuclear power. When we started in the 50s, we were world leaders. The mantle passed to the French to some degree. What is it? 70% of their electricity comes from nuclear. They chose a different path.
Of course, that was the reaction to the energy crisis in the early 70s. And they were the only real European nuclear force that it was under a socialist government. All these nuclear power plants were built with huge subsidies. But as you said, roughly 70% of their electricity is generated by nuclear energy. And the problem, of course, is that the unbelievably ridiculous regulations in Europe are such that it's almost astronomical to build a nuclear power plant. That makes it so difficult in Britain to pursue new nuclear. But as I said, everything is now up in the air.
Yeah.
Everything has changed. And the most important thing for Europe is to look for alternative energy supplies. And Britain will play a dominant role in that because we're sitting on huge reserves of natural gas and still a lot of oil. And the Mediterranean is full of natural gas and oil. So there are new opportunities that were closed down because of naivety.
Well, I mean, and that's a conversation we'll have some other time. Benny Pizer, not least about fracking. We appreciate your time very much indeed. Kwasi Kwarteng has announced, I think, about £100 million of investment in nuclear. I think I'm right in saying that. Is that remotely and near enough what's needed? We'll talk to Cathy Gingell about that and the rest of the day's stories that we've been covering in just a moment. And also asking this question, is there a religious dimension to Putin's invasion of Ukraine? It's the birthplace of the Russian Orthodox faith. We'll be talking that through. But first, the weather.
Hello again. Blue skies across the north today, cloudier skies further south. Most of us will be in the cloudier boat tomorrow with rain and drizzle in the west, but it should be another sunny day across northwest Scotland, where this area of high pressure will hold on. But down to the south, we've got low pressure and weather fronts, which are slowly trudging northwards, certainly bringing a wet evening across Devon, Cornwall, much of Hampshire, and that rain extending across parts of southeast England and trickling into South Wales too. That rain will continue to spread into the Midlands also, but northern England northwards staying mostly dry with clear skies. Across Scotland we will see a frost forming pretty quickly here this evening, and by dawn certainly in rural spots down to -3, -4. Further south, a long way from freezing. Temperatures in Cardiff and London to start Wednesday, 6 or 7 Celsius. But it will be grey, it will be damp. That rain will trickle into parts of northern England, particularly west of the Pennines. Parts of the northeast of England may stay dry. The rain will spread into Northern Ireland, so a very different day here and across North Wales compared to today. Eventually some of that rain will spread into southwest Scotland, but much of Scotland dry, and again that far northwest corner staying dry, fine and pretty sunny. Temperatures in the south quite mild, but not feeling all that mild with the dull and dank weather, which will continue to trickle northwards during the course of the evening, eventually clouding over across the northwest of Scotland. The rain tending to ease off in many areas, but another line of rain pushes into Wales and southwest England as we go into Thursday. And this line of rain is a slow-moving weather front which will only very gradually trickle into the Midlands, parts of northern England during the day on Thursday. Should brighten up in Northern Ireland, probably brightening up in Wales and southwest England during the day on Thursday as well, and staying largely dry across the eastern parts. Again, temperatures in the south double figures, further north 7, 8 or 9 Celsius. Goodbye.
Join me, Darren Grimes, for Real Britain every Saturday and Sunday from 2 p.m. A news hour that comes with a trigger warning. Scorching hot opinion with prominent guests saying the unsayable and a little bit of weekend fun thrown in. Unlike other broadcasters, I won't be forgetting what the B in our name stands for. So howie in for Real Britain Saturday and Sunday from 2 p.m.
GB News is the UK's home of discussion and debate
from all perspectives.
To stay up to date on the latest stories,
make sure that you subscribe to the GB News channel
right here on YouTube.
You can watch us live 24/7 across the whole world.
You can also check out exclusive content and catch up on previous episodes of your favourite shows.
Every day, we ask the questions
that you'd ask, so why not add your voice to the conversation in the comments section?
Don't forget to subscribe. We are GB News, Britain's news channel.
Every night at 11 on GB News, we bring you the next day's stories the day before.
Basically like time travel.
If it's a big story, we'll cover it, guaranteed. But we'll also have some fun along the way.
Big opinions, big laughs. Sometimes big hair.
This is
Headliners, the paper review show that won't send you to sleep like the others will.
11 p.m, 7 nights a week. Join us.
Hello there, I'm Eamon Holmes.
And I'm Isabel Webster.
And we hope you can join us for
Breakfast with Eamon
and Isabel.
You make me laugh out loud, belly laugh.
Is that important first thing in the morning?
Yeah, absolutely.
And there's me trying to be deadly serious. News is a serious business.
Yeah, I have to rein you in sometimes.
Well, it doesn't stop us laughing at it. It doesn't stop us having an opinion on what's going on.
Yeah.
And it certainly will not stop us reflecting what you think.
Weekdays from 6 to 9:30 on GB News.
I'm Dan Wootton. Join me Monday to Thursday from 9 to 11 for the feistiest and most fun news debate on TV, where free speech reigns. I'll bring you a sharp take on the day's biggest stories, bombshell newsmaker interviews, and A-list guests. And I guarantee you, no spin, no bias, no censorship, and no reason to go to bed. That's Dan Wootton Tonight, Monday to Thursdays from 9 on GB News.
Train ticket prices have risen by their largest amount in 9 years in England and Wales. It comes at a time when many families are feeling the pinch, obviously, inflation shooting up and tax hikes too. GB News' North West reporter Bradley Harris has been at Manchester Piccadilly Station to sample the views there.
It feels like we talk about train ticket prices going up every year, but this year in particular is quite something, because in England and Wales, for rail passengers, this is the biggest jump on ticket prices since the year 2013. It's not only bad timing, but it's also going to leave a big impact for people who regularly use train services, particularly those season ticket holders. Of course, we've got a cost of living crisis at the minute. Energy prices, grocery bills are all going up and up and up. Petrol prices at the minute are over £1.50 a litre. So to have an added cost and an increased cost on your train travel is going to be a major blow, particularly for low earners who are facing a cost of living crisis at the moment. I've been outside Manchester Piccadilly train station today to find out how passengers are feeling about this increase and whether they think it's worth it.
3.8%, it might not sound like much, but for me, as I say, I'm a student here at the University of Manchester and I'm commuting here 5 days a week from Doncaster. And as I say, the sort of weekly tickets are not that sustainable and they're not very flexible. So I'm getting single tickets pretty much every day or returns. So 3.8% every day will add up to a lot. For people like me who are commuting and use the trains a lot, it will add up.
No, I don't think we should be increasing our rail fares, mainly because you look at other places, even in Europe, you could probably pay £11 for the same journey and probably on a quieter train and probably on a better looking train as well.
And it's not a massive increase, but again, I don't think they should be charging us any more than they already do. I don't have a rail card. I should probably get one.
For us to go out and then spend like 60-something quid just to get to a place, it's not really fair. It stops us going out. So it stops going out if it goes up.
Let's remember that before the COVID-19 pandemic began, most fares were actually controlled by train operators. Since then, they've come under control by the state after they poured billions of pounds to try and keep services running. I've got a statement from the Department for Transport here, and it says that the government has taken a number of measures to ensure rail passengers do not face further increases than absolutely necessary, such as, they say, delaying the date of ticket rises from the 1st of January to the 1st of March. That allows passengers then to buy cheaper tickets for longer, they say. Also, today's rail fare rise of 3.8%, they say, is being capped below the current retail price inflation of 7.8%, a real-term cut for passengers. That's from a statement from the Department for Transport. Well, at the minute, rail demand is at a third below what it usually was before the COVID-19 pandemic. With these ticket price increases, it'll be interesting to see whether people change their commute and opt for the car to make their journeys into work, not forgetting the price rise there with fuel, or whether people will choose to work from home and cancel their commute altogether.
Well, Bradley Harris on one aspect of the cost of living crisis, as we're coming to call it. Cathy Gingell is alongside me here. We were just chatting while Bradley was talking to you about one aspect of the cost of living crisis, how to alleviate it potentially. I'll come to some emails we've been getting on this subject shortly, but it's foreign aid. There are people who insist it has to be given to some really quite kleptocratic countries. Are you one of them?
No, I think we need to... They were very clever, the government. About a year or so ago, lots of people were criticising the foreign aid budgets because it's going to countries that are so corrupt, that are very high up on the international corruption list. And what they did was close down the specific foreign aid department, but they just put it into the Foreign Office. So nothing actually changed in the payments that were being made. No, they have to face this. It's very woke and it's very corrupt. It's badly used. The countries like Pakistan and India do not need it from us.
Well, they will say they do, but consider this, and we are going to be considering this in the company of Ben Habib, MEP, former MEP, shortly. He's got some very strong opinions on this. He was born in Karachi, so Pakistani born, reflecting on the fact that we've learned today that a major trade deal has been agreed between Vladimir Putin and Imran Khan, the leader of Pakistan, worth lots and lots of money. Josh says, I wish more people in the UK and other Western countries had asked themselves about the wisdom and merits of aid to Pakistan after Osama bin Laden was located there nearly 10 years after 9/11. Lisa says, no foreign aid should be given out whilst our people are struggling. Michael says Pakistan is a nuclear power and has a space programme. It does not need a single penny of foreign aid from the UK. We're picking on Pakistan, Cathy, but the point is, if they are standing with a country we are now opposed to in what may be a new kind of Cold War, then we're going to have to start making choices.
Well, we have to start making choices. It's actually worse than people realise because we give money to our foreign aid budget's quite complex in what we give to International Monetary Fund to give away for us. We give to other organisations and quangos, intermediary ones, so we don't actually have much control over it anyway. So it's not necessarily helping the poor family in Karachi, for example. It's getting lost along the way, and it is part of a very, what I'd call a leftist, wokist thing that you have to be seen to do. But if you examine what happens to that money, it ain't good.
No, and does create and can create a dependency culture as well, can't it? Still to come this afternoon, could supermarket slow lanes dedicated to chit-chat help solve a loneliness epidemic? The French have come to that conclusion. But first, the latest news headlines with Rhiannon.
It's 5:33. I'm Rhiannon Jones in the GB newsroom. At least 5 people have been killed in a Russian attack on a television tower in the Ukrainian capital of Kiev. The Ukrainian Foreign Ministry has called the attack barbaric. It happened near a memorial site commemorating the victims of Babin Yar, one of the biggest single massacres of Jews during the Holocaust. Speaking in Estonia earlier, Boris Johnson said the UK and its allies must isolate Vladimir Putin from the international community.
It's clearer, day by day, from the way the Ukrainians are responding, that President Putin has made a disastrous miscalculation. His troops have not been welcomed into Ukraine as he prophesied, and instead the Ukrainians have mounted an astonishing and tenacious resistance.
The Foreign Ministry has released video footage of a missile hitting a government building in Ukraine's second largest city, Kharkiv. The Interior Ministry says at least 10 people have been killed in rocket attacks in the city so far today. As a massive Russian convoy makes its way towards Kiev, the United Nations says more than 660,000 refugees have fled to neighbouring countries already. Home Secretary Priti Patel told MPs that more Ukrainians will be eligible to seek refuge in the UK through both the family and the sponsorship route. The Chief Prosecutor of the International Criminal Court says he'll open an investigation into possible war crimes in Ukraine. Amnesty International says cluster bombs hit a nursery last week, and Ukraine's ambassador to the United States says Russia has used vacuum bombs. Both are banned under the Geneva Convention. In an address to the European Parliament, Ukraine's president accused Russia of targeting civilians.
Nobody's going to break us. We are strong. We are Ukrainians. We want our children to live. It seems to me that is fair. Yesterday, 16 children died, and again, President Putin will say that this is an operation and we are beating the military infrastructure. Where are our children? What military factories do they work at? On which rockets? Maybe they ride in tanks.
Vladimir Zelensky there. TV online and DAB Plus radio. This is GB News. We'll have a full update for you at the top of the hour. It's back to Brazier in just a moment.
GB News is the UK's home of discussion and debate.
From all perspectives.
To stay up to date on the latest stories,
make sure that you subscribe to the GB News channel right here on YouTube.
You can watch us live 24/7 across the whole world.
You can also check out exclusive content and catch up on previous episodes of your favourite shows.
Every day, we ask the questions
that you'd ask, so why not add your voice to the conversation in the comments section?
Don't forget to subscribe. We are GB News, Britain's news channel.
Every night at 11 on GB News, we bring you the next day's stories the day before.
Basically like time travel.
If it's a big story, we'll cover it, guaranteed. But we'll also have some fun along the way.
Big opinions, big laughs. Sometimes big hair.
This is Headliners, the paper review show that won't send you to sleep like the others will.
11 p.m, 7 nights a week. Join us.
Hello there, I'm Eamon Holmes.
And I'm Isabel Webster.
And we hope you can join us for
Breakfast with Eamon
and Isabel.
You make me laugh out loud, belly laugh.
Is that important first thing in the morning?
Yeah, absolutely.
And there's me trying to be deadly serious. News is a serious business.
Yeah, I have to rein you in sometimes.
Well, it doesn't stop us laughing at it. It doesn't stop us having an opinion on what's going on.
Yeah.
And it certainly will not stop us reflecting what you think.
Weekdays from 6 to 9:30 on GB News.
I'm Dan Wootton. Join me Monday to Thursday from 9 to 11 for the feistiest and most fun news debate on TV, where free speech reigns. I'll bring you a sharp take on the day's biggest stories, bombshell newsmaker interviews, and A-list guests. And I guarantee you, no spin, no bias, no censorship, and no reason to go to bed. That's Dan Wootton Tonight, Monday to Thursdays from 9 on GB News.
Welcome back. You're with Colin Brazier on GB News, on TV, online and on digital radio. Now, a French supermarket chain has introduced chit-chat checkouts into 150 of its stores. Carrefour follows Dutch chain Jumbo in introducing the slow lanes in an attempt to combat loneliness, especially amongst elderly shoppers. Let's turn to Harry Mount, editor of the Oldie magazine, to reflect on this one. Harry, pleasure talking to you. It's nice to have you on the show.
Hello, Colin. Hello.
Hi. I get deeply frustrated when I'm in a checkout queue, avoiding the robotic checkouts in the hope of talking to a real human being, having a chat, and I try and have a chat, and I often find it's often men tut-tutting behind me because they see it as an entirely transactional activity, not a moment to be gassing.
Well, it's probably me standing behind you in the queue, Colin, because I'm one of those grumpy, silent men who would love a non-chat queue. I'm one of those men who stand with their wallet in one hand, credit card already out in the other hand, so I can get through as quickly as possible. So these chatty queues sound like hell unless they filter out chatty people like you into one queue. Then us grumpy, misanthropic people like me can go into the silent, super quick queue.
8 million people in this country now, Harry. 8 million people live alone. Every little helps, as some supermarket chain once said.
Yeah, I could see that's true. And if you're a chatty, friendly person, that those little interactions in the day, I mean, I must admit, even I felt it during lockdown. The lack of social interaction was very bad for all of us. But the difference is between, say, chatting to someone at a party and chatting to someone when you're holding up somebody behind you, as you seem to do, Colin. And that is agony for misanthropic people like me. And it is normally grumpy males.
You've got the automated checkouts, Harry, now. You need to have no human interaction at all. You just head straight for the automated checkout.
Well, exactly. Well, that might be the answer. Then you'll have one half of the supermarket with people chatting away and the other half with men going through at top speed. In fact, there is a famous Simpsons sketch some years ago with Marge and Homer Simpson going to the supermarket. One queue has lots of men on their own. The other one has one chatty woman. And Homer says, go for the queue with the men in it. It'll go much more quickly. And the men go while the lady's still chatting.
But Harry, sorry, it's Kathy butting in. Don't you think this whole digital thing, is dehumanising? I mean, we have to have interaction. Not everyone gets invited to parties, you know, Harry. You might be one of the lucky ones. And if you take away human contact, you take away any human interaction. Actually, it doesn't matter if it's supermarkets, banks, wherever. You lose a little bit of humanity along the way each time, don't you? Of understanding each other, treating each other as human beings.
Between the different forms of interaction, and so I completely agree that humans are social creatures, and it's not just lockdown, but even before that, computers, threaded phones have destroyed so much of that pleasant interaction. And I imagine we're all feeling this now. Thank God the restrictions are gone. It's wonderful to see people in the flesh,
but
as long as you're not holding up somebody behind you.
But no, we have to hold up. You have to put up with the somebody behind you, because if you give in to that and do that, we all are just little automatons doing that, and we stop being able to communicate with anybody. That's the price we have to pay for humanity, in my view. This is my little debate with you.
Oh, I've got the perfect answer. I so hate shopping, like many males, that I do practically all my shopping online. I do my supermarket shopping online. When the nice guy comes from Tesco's to my flat, I love having a chat with him, because you know it's an isolated transaction. You can chat away to him. You're not holding up anyone.
You're trying to be in control all the time.
So it's about chatting in isolation.
It's about control.
Oh, Christ. Harry, I do apologise. I had no idea this one was going to get spiky. That's Kathy Ginchel for you. Harry Mount.
Probably very, very probably about control. And it is striking how, if I dare say, there is a gender difference on this. Women basically being nicer than men. They prefer to have a chat. Men being these more simple creatures don't go in for chatting so much.
Harry Mount is the editor of the Oldie magazine. If you've never read it, I recommend it very strongly to you, and we appreciate his time today and putting up with some of Kathy's interventions. Now, what makes Vladimir Putin tick? He loves his country and, it seems, is prepared to kill for its right to dominate neighbours. But what about his his Orthodox faith, his Russian Orthodox faith. How important is it to him? It's not just an academic thought, is it? If this is a new Cold War, we need to understand what it is we're facing, and that means understanding Putin. Well, joining me now to discuss this, Pavel Stroilov, who's a Russian lawyer and consultant to the Christian Legal Centre, lived in London since 2004. Pavel, thanks for coming in, appreciate it.
Good evening.
There was a fantastic piece on the Unheard website by Giles Fraser, who's an Anglican vicar recently, just reminding us that actually in Putin you've got somebody who actually is surprisingly devout. I mean, baptised in secret by his mother.
Well, look, you have to remember you are dealing with a KGB officer. His job is to pretend what he is not. His job is to make you believe he is something that you want him to be, and that makes him achieve his objectives with you. So he had some blasphemous flirting with Christianity in the past. But as a matter of fact, now it is pretty much gone. And what he has been saying this past week was all about comrades, we are coming to reclaim the Soviet Empire, and Ukraine doesn't exist. It's a Soviet administrative unit created by Lenin, and now comrades, that's how he addresses his troops. Well, we are coming. There is virtually nothing about Christianity. No wonder. Well, if you obviously his Christianity, if there is one, it is the one without "thou shalt not kill" and the one without "thou shalt not steal."
Yeah, well, you make that's a very good theological point, isn't it? One he's clearly massively in breach of when it comes to the commandments. Can I ask you something that's not a theological question, Pavel? As a Russian living in England right now, what are you facing any hostility, questions when you talk to people? What's it like?
No, not at all. And I went to protest the other day side by side with Ukrainians outside Russian embassy with a Russian flag saying "No war," and it was extremely friendly and somewhat touchingly and justifiably Ukrainians were thanking us for coming to support them in this situation, which is, well, obviously the least we can do.
Can I ask a question going back to the Christianity? It is certainly true, isn't it, that he has stopped oppressing Christians and Christianity has massively been able to expand and express itself in Russia since he took over?
Yes and no. His vision is that, yes, well, I want an empire. An empire needs a loyal church, which is going to be helpful for my imperial aims. And so he is building and patronizing that church, but no other. And other churches in Russia, including Christian churches, they are facing all the laws against extremism, all the laws against...
You mean just the Russian Orthodox Church he patronizes?
It's just the Russian Orthodox Church, and within the Russian Orthodox Church it must be strict discipline under hierarchy. If a priest calls for Christian charity to protesters who are being beaten up by riot police, he gets punished.
But Pavel, we're out of time. Just tell me in one word, if you can, will Vladimir Putin still be in charge of Russia in a year from now?
Well, I very much hope not. I very much hope not. And for me, that means a chance to come back to Russia when he's not. I really hope it is going to be the end of him. But, well, we must, to achieve that, we must not only pray for Ukrainians, we must not only have tough rhetoric about the Ukrainians. I think we need to do more to help them now. And President Zelensky has asked for a no-fly zone, and that on the same day we are seeing all these atrocities with now civilian population.
We will talk about that before the end of the hour. Pavel Stroilov, really appreciate you coming in today. Thanks very much, Nick, for your time.
Thank you.
Pakistan's leader, Imran Khan, was in Moscow last week. It's emerged today that the former cricketer turned politician signed a big trade deal with Vladimir Putin, 2 million tons of wheat, lots of gas. Pakistan, a country of more than 220 million, has a lot of mouths to feed, and it's increasingly cozying up to Russia and China and moving away from the Western orbit, which, of course, is its sovereign right as a country. But consider this. As Pakistan moves into Putin's orbit, should we still be paying more than £250 million in foreign aid to Islamabad? In other words, why should British taxpayers' money be given away to help a government which is spending billions on trade with a country that increasingly looks like our enemy? Joining me now, former MEP and Karachi-born Briton, Ben Habib. Ben Habib, appreciate your time as ever. Is this time to start looking hard at that £250 million we sign over to Pakistan?
Well, as far as that £250 million is concerned, that was always wasted money. I've never really understood why the British government was doing it, because it was too small to really gain Pakistan's attention and significantly big enough to be used, better in the United Kingdom. It sort of fell between two stools, if you like, as far as I'm concerned. But what's very interesting, I think, about what we're seeing now between Pakistan and Russia is really the continuation of something that's been going on for the last 20 years while Afghanistan was occupied by Western forces. And that is the continual, and you said Pakistan's sovereign right to move away from the West. Actually, I turn that slightly on its head. It's Pakistan has been, over the last 20 years, and perhaps even longer, been steadily pushed away from the West. And it's a very subtle move that's resulted in this, but it's gaining momentum. And I guess the best way to exemplify it is to put it into numerical terms. Pakistan has something like $2 billion a year worth of foreign direct investment. China has made a commitment of $60 billion to invest in Pakistan infrastructure as part of its Belt and Road project. It's called the Chinese-Pakistan Economic Corridor. Now, when Pakistan is in receipt an offer of $60 billion, it's never going to be pivoted in any direction by $350 million, which I think is what the US gives.
It's neither here nor there, Ben. It's neither here nor there.
It's neither here nor there. And I think the mistake the West has made with Pakistan is actually not engaging with it enough. The West has taken a very ideological position, as it often does in its foreign policies, and has alienated Pakistan through that ideological position. China doesn't do that. China is a very strong ideology internally, but it doesn't export its ideology when it comes to foreign relations and foreign trade. And what I would like to see the West doing is actually engaging more with Pakistan, dealing more with Pakistan, diluting the reliance of Pakistan on China and now Russia, and to make Pakistan turn its head back towards us in the West.
Yeah, I spent a few months in Pakistan in the early 2000s. I was in Karachi for a while, and there was still the vestiges, I suppose, of empire in a sense. You got people, senior figures in the military, for instance, who remembered those fondly links with Britain. I imagine that's all gone now. But what you had then that must still be true is a sense in which you faced a choice. You either, as the West, backed India or you backed Pakistan. And it seems now the West has decided it'll back India, not Pakistan.
Yeah, I mean, as I spent my early years in Pakistan, Pakistan was an absolute committed ally of the United Kingdom and the US. And as you rightly point out, Colin, very many people still actually have fond memories of their, contrary to what some commentators in the United Kingdom might say, fond memories of our imperial links to the United Kingdom. And I was one of them. We were very pro the US. And sadly, the invasion of Afghanistan in 1979 by Russia threw a huge stone in that otherwise calm lake. And Pakistan has been buffeted ever since. And it's spun out of the orbit of the United Kingdom and the US over the last 20 years in particular as a result of what's been going on in Afghanistan. But, if we just look at what Imran Khan has done with Russia right now, and it's quite informative, and the West should be watching this quite carefully. What we've done in the West now is cut Russia off. Russia is a distressed seller of assets, if I put it in Western capitalist terms. It's a distressed seller of assets. So probably Pakistan has struck a really good deal for the wheat that it's bought and the gas that it's bought. And it's thinking it's going to capitalize on the economic plight of Russia. And Russia is going to sidle up to Pakistan because it needs money from wherever it can now get it. And that's the reality. What we're seeing is an iron curtain coming down across the globe, and alliances being remade, and new alliances being made, and a new order is going to emerge.
Ben, you're
and I
absolutely
hope
right.
Pakistan will be on our side of the fence, not on Russia's.
It's Cold War 2.0, and I don't think the foot has dropped for a lot of people. I think it's still dawning on them. We've got to leave it there. Ben Habib, really good to talk to you as ever. Just some final thoughts from Kathy Kingill, who's alongside me. New Cold War. Wake up and smell the coffee, says Ben Habib.
Wake up and smell the coffee, and it all goes back to the West's self-loathing. Here we are lecturing everyone on freedom and democracy, but we actually, at the same time, are spending our time running our own country down. And as Ben said so interestingly, I thought people who they're not negative about Britain, they weren't negative about Britain, but we teach our children to be negative about Britain. That doesn't make us a strong country. We must start being more positive about our country and just stopping lecturing other people.
Just got time for a couple of emails. Really enjoyed your company today, Kathy, as always. This is just from Paddy, who says, while I'm absolutely against what Putin is doing and has done, it's easy to see where he's coming from. He must have looked, and this is the point that Kathy Kingill was just making, he must have looked at the West tying itself in knots over pronouns, gender, wokeness and vacuous celebrity virtue signalling, and thought to himself, now is my time while they're weak. Philip takes a contrary view. We killed more people in Iraq than Putin is killing in Ukraine. And one finally from Stephen, if Putin is so scared of catching COVID, this back to our original point at the top of the programme, I very much doubt he will launch nukes knowing he'll get them in return. The only way to talk to Putin is with force. We'll have less Ukrainian news eventually, but not for now. More news coming up.
Hello again. Blue skies across the north today, cloudier skies further south. Most of us will be in the cloudier boat tomorrow with rain and drizzle in the west, but it should be another sunny day across northwest Scotland, where this area of high pressure will hold on. But down to the south, we've got low pressure and weather fronts, which are slowly trudging northwards, certainly bringing a wet evening across Devon, Cornwall, much of Hampshire, and that rain extending across parts of southeast England and trickling into South Wales too. That rain will continue to spread into the Midlands also, but northern England northwards staying mostly dry, and with clear skies across Scotland we will see a frost forming pretty quickly here this evening, and by dawn certainly in rural spots down to -3, -4. Further south, a long way from freezing. Temperatures in Cardiff and London to start Wednesday, 6 or 7 Celsius. But it will be grey, it will be damp. That rain will trickle into parts of northern England, particularly west of the Pennines. Parts of the northeast of England may stay dry. The rain will spread into Northern Ireland, so a very different day here and across North Wales compared to today. Eventually some of that rain will spread into southwest Scotland, but much of Scotland dry, and again that far northwest corner staying dry, fine and pretty sunny. Temperatures in the south quite mild, but not feeling all that mild, with the dull and dank weather which will continue to trickle northwards during the course of the evening, eventually clouding over across the northwest of Scotland. The rain tending to ease off in many areas, but another line of rain pushes into Wales and southwest England as we go into Thursday. And this line of rain is a slow-moving weather front which will only very gradually trickle into the Midlands, parts of northern England during the day on Thursday. Should brighten up in Northern Ireland, probably brightening up in Wales and southwest England during the day on Thursday as well, and staying largely dry across eastern parts. Again, temperatures in the south, double figures, further north, 7, 8 or 9 Celsius. Goodbye.
Join me and Naya Falarin Iman for the discussion every Sunday at 3 p.m. here. From big ideas to questions shaping the public conversation, we tackle the moral, cultural and political implications of news stories.
We need to share this conversation democratically.
It has become so toxic, this debate.
They relish this kind of discourse.
From fascinating